So welcome to the next edition of the Punk CX podcast. This is one of those that features a series of chats that I've had with Qualtrics executives that I've met while being at their X4 annual customer event here in Seattle. Well, actually, at the time of publication, it will be last week. I am going to be talking to Brad Anderson, who's the president of products, UX, engineering and security at Qualtrics, and his colleagues Mark Hammond, who's the SVP of Core AI, Assaf Keren, who's the SVP and Chief Security Officer, and Ali Henriques, who's the Global Senior Director of Market Research. Some of the things that we cover include the big themes and takeaways from the event, where AI technology is going, security, trust, and also synthetic panels, and how all of these things can help you improve how you serve your customers. So let's get into the first conversation that I had with Brad Anderson. We're here at X4 in Seattle. It's Qualtrics' annual customer event, big global annual customer event. And this is the first in a series of conversations that I've been having with different executives from Qualtrics about the event and what's kind of stood out. And I'm pleased to say that, proud, yeah, I'll be proud. Why not? I'm pleased to say that I'm with Brad Anderson, who's the president of products, UX and engineering at Qualtrics. We meet again.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Great. Having a lot of fun. I'll tell you, as an engineer that builds things, coming to conferences like this where you hear customers talking about value that they're seeing and how it's changing their lives, this is the rewarding part of the job.
Yeah.
Because, as engineers, we build things and then you hope and pray and you work hard to make sure that they get used. And so this is just incredibly rewarding.
Awesome. So one of the things I wanted to ask was that there's been a number of keynotes, a number of different speakers. You've got a new CEO as well. Jason was on the stage yesterday. And I wanted to get your perspective on what are some of the big themes, the overarching kind of themes of the event, and sort of some of your highlights, your personal highlights of the event so far.
Yeah, the theme is really pretty. It's pretty easy to describe. The first one is you have to listen across all the channels, okay, so that you can understand really what the entire journey is and get that full texture. The second thing is you have to be able to act with context, understand with context, and act in the moment. And then the third thing is all around trust.
Okay.
Okay, so we go into one of those a little bit more. Most of our customers today are single channel in terms of where they're getting their feedback back in that survey. It's the easiest one to get stood up. But if you're only getting input coming in from surveys and you're missing things like social reviews and calls and chats, you're getting less than 10% of the data that you should be listening to. And so we've worked really hard to make it easy for customers to be able to bring in all of those different channels and then have them get understood. So that's the first thing. The second thing is we've worked hard to enable our customers of all sizes, because historically it was only available to the largest customers who had big budgets, to really have a world-class text analytics, conversational analytics solution. So that's one of the biggest things, and I'm actually the most proud of, that we put into the market this year at X4, is the ability to be able to stand up truly a world-class conversational analytics program driven by AI in days, where that used to be months.
Okay.
And then the final thing is trust. In this world of AI, organizations will use the AI from providers that they trust. And so a lot of our focus has been demonstrating the work that we've done on certifications, on things that we've done that can prove that we can be trusted, and that we're trusted by the most sophisticated, regulated financial services, governments, healthcare organizations on the planet.
I'm pleased that you mentioned trust, because funnily enough, it almost feels like a professional segue, because I'm speaking to Assaf as another segment in this kind of podcast where we go into
who's a remarkable leader.
He's and a big brain too.
Yeah,
and with a bunch of experience. So thank you for that. I mean, the other thing I wanted to ask about was that I love a bit of a gap. You see there's a difference, and there's a theme that's been people are talking about. I think Jason kicked it off at the yesterday.
Serious gap,
and talked about the experience kind of gap. I mean, tell me about that and what you see happening in the market, because I heard people saying that, going, oh, we've got all these insights, and we've turned the handle on kind of analytics and stuff, and we had all these dashboards, and we got this report, and then
nothing.
Crickets.
Yeah.
Or tumbleweed. We'll pick your metaphor.
Yeah, exactly.
So tell me about the experience gap.
Okay. So for a decade as an industry, we've helped organizations understand that there's a framework that you need to listen, you need to understand, and you need to act. Okay. Each one of those has had its own friction points and speed bumps that have slowed down, really making a difference. We feel pretty good about the gap that existed between listening and being able to understand what it is that you're hearing. And all of the generative AI, all the AI innovations over the last 2 or 3 years has really enabled us to solve that gap. Okay, so our customers and I feel really good right now about we can bring in. True Green this morning talked about going from 500,000 survey signals to 500 million. Experience signals that were coming in. The AI that we have built enables an organization to understand that. Okay. Now, the gap that exists now is between understanding and actually taking action. And so the easiest way for me to describe this is whenever I meet with a customer, one of the questions that I'll ask them is, of all the CX feedback that comes into your organization, what percentage of them actually has follow-up done where the individual who gave the feedback feels that they were listened to, that they were understood, and the loop is closed? And it's 1 or 2%.
Yeah, I mean, the closing the loop is like an old idea, and people have always struggled to do it. And I think historically, that when that was initially originated, people were going, okay, we're listening and we're asking for opinion, and we collect that, and then the numbers start to fall off in terms of analyzing it, thinking about what it means, then dedicating resources to do something about what it means, and then reporting back to the customers. And it's almost a bit like you had a large number of people that were listening and asking for feedback, and then just went, oh yeah. And so it's interesting to hear that that's kind of where the gap is. And my question, I guess, is that how much of that is both hard technical tooling, and how much of it is soft, cultural, and building up social capital within your organization in order to kind of make people's lives easier?
I would actually add a third one that's even bigger than those two, which is just human capacity.
Okay.
Think of any B2C organization that's operating at scale. They're getting millions, if not tens of millions of pieces of customer feedback coming back. Organizations just don't have the human capacity to follow up on that.
Right.
So this is an example, a really good example of where AI can really extend what humans can do in a way that, you're still reserving the human judgment, you're still reserving the human empathy, but you can scale that now through things like experience agents to be able to close the loop, theoretically on 100% of the interactions that come in.
Okay.
Very few are going to get to 100%, but theoretically that should be our goal.
And one final thing on that is that, because you also mentioned that, so in the briefing on Tuesday prior to the start, you talked about the maturity curve.
Yeah.
You talked about there's
early majority and the early adopters.
Yeah, there's people that are just out front. They're leaders. They're off to the races. They do their thing, and they're always going to be out front. And then there's you're now seeing the early majority start to kind of come in. And I was just wondering about what are you seeing from them that's making the difference that allows them to almost break those bonds of inertia and actually start to deliver, close the gap, and then deliver on those actions.
Is that specific about early adopters doing it versus the early majority?
Or just both? What are you learning from that population sort of thing? Because it's a significant population, and you've seen significant shifts, it seems.
Sure. Yeah, so the framework here that we're talking about is a framework that was put together by a remarkable individual named Jeffrey Moore, and he coined this term of crossing the chasm. And what he talked about is in any technology adoption curve, there are 5 segments. So, it starts with visionaries who are just they're literally on the bleeding edge. Then you've got early adopters who are risk takers. They are optimistic. They are willing to work with things that are rough, but they have this innate feeling or belief that X and Y is going to drive business outcomes. Sure. Okay. And then there's this big, what's called the chasm, and it's a gap between what the expectations are of that third segment, which is called the early majority. And that's where it really hits mainstream. Okay. Those mainstream, that early majority, want predictability. They want standardization. They want proven ROI. They want things to work out of the box. And so the big shift in this experience management category, which is only 10 years old, is I think that we have worked closely as an industry with the early adopters, and that has given us the foundation of what we have. Yeah. Now it's all about, can we make this simple? And this also goes to one of your questions that you asked as we were kind of, talking a minute ago. It's about the business outcomes. Yeah. So this early majority are pragmatists, not, They might also be visionary, but they are pragmatists. And so they want to go in being able to prove and say, here is the ROI that we're going to get, and here I'm going to prove it to you.
Right.
And so that's why you see one of the big shifts in the conference this year. It's really talking less about having the product take front and center stage, and it's all about the outcomes that customers are seeing, because that's what that next big set of customers is looking for.
Yeah, no, that's because, as you alluded to, I was going to ask about that, because it's quite, to me, it was quite stark. If you go to other technology vendor customer events, then it's like you're like, the hose pipe is, and it's all the product announcements. It's like, oh my God. And then there's customer stories intermingled in that. But the theme, or the feel for me this year from X4 is that you are leading with these broad themes about listen, understanding context, act in the moment, etc.
Yeah.
But then it's customer stories that are front and kind of center. And it feels like that's are you therefore speaking to the maturation of your audience, as it were? Because I've been to other events where it feels like you have all these announcements and people are like going, that's great, but we're not quite ready, and the bus is kind of like taking off into the distance. And I feel like sometimes technology vendors move faster than their audiences sometimes, because
that's always the case.
They get caught up in the product, and so it feels like there's a very conscious shift. And I was really excited to see the CFO of TrueGreen on the stage, and I'm like, what? And he smashed it. Great presentation.
Yeah, because it was numbers driven, it was outcome driven.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. So is that just been has it been a realization or a conscious shift, or something that you've just kind of gone, we're going to do this because it's actually, we've got to speak to a different kind of audience?
Yeah, it's twofold. First of all, putting our own framework to work of listen, understand, act. When we looked at the feedback from X4 2025 a year ago, some of the feedback that we got, was exactly this. Yeah. Which is, hey, on the main stage, we would like to see fewer product demos and hear more from customers, what their real challenges are, what the real outcomes that they're seeing. And so we took that feedback and we said, hey, listen, we're going to listen and understand and act like, and we're going to practice what we preach.
Nice.
So it was a specific pivot. And I'll tell you, personally, I struggled with it for a few weeks. I mean, I'm a product guy.
Yeah, sure.
And
I want to talk about the stuff.
Exactly. Yesterday was the first keynote I've ever given where I didn't do a product demo.
Right.
Ever. But it's the right approach, because
what do you feel going like,
yeah, exactly. You got it.
You're like going, where's my laptop? Where's the kind of thing? Am I not supposed to that must be weird.
And so they were, first of all, we got the feedback. And then second, as we look at the next set of customers that we need to help embrace these concepts of experience management, they want those proven outcomes, those proven results. And so that also came into play with it.
Nice. I know, as I say, that's really good to hear. I mean, you're eating your own dog food or drinking your own champagne, whatever the metaphor you want to use.
Eating our own fish and chips if we're,
Thank you. But if there was one final question for me, if there's one overriding sort of message that you'd want to leave kind of people with, or have them leave kind of X4 with, what would it be?
Understand the business outcome that your company is focused on, and then demonstrate how Qualtrics and experience management can help achieve and exceed those business outcomes.
Perfect.
TrueGreen is a perfect example. They came in and said, listen, our renewal rate is in the 60s. We need to drive it to the 80s. All right, now there's a goal that the whole company is aligned behind. And our advocates, our users can go and say, here is how we can help to hit that goal. But that's the biggest thing. Identify something that matters and that has broad support and understanding across an organization, and then build a plan on how Qualtrics and experience management can help you achieve those goals.
Perfect. I think I would add to that, and I would echo the impact that the TrueGreen CFO had. And I would suggest that anybody who is a CX leader that might be listening to this kind of podcast is to realize that, one, it's not about you. It's about kind of like what the outcomes that you drive, about the business. But ultimately, your goal, I think, should be to try and get your own CFO on the stage to talk about the outcomes that they're driving and why it matters. Because if you can do that, then you've succeeded, because that's probably the hardest thing to achieve in a kind of corporate environment.
That's right. That's why I made a little bit of a joke, about how many of you have been fighting to get the concept of experience management on the agenda of your CFO. That's where the rubber hits the road.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Awesome.
I really enjoyed my chat with Brad. I really like how they've changed the focus of their event after listening to feedback from customers. Before I ramble on a bit more about that, let's get into my next chat with Mark Hammond, where we talk about AI and where it's going, particularly in the CX space. So I'm here with Mark Hammond, who's SVP of Core AI at Qualtrics. We're at X4 in Seattle. Now, you had a session kind of earlier, and I wondered if you could just give me a little bit of because it was talking about what's coming.
Yes.
So the kind of the whole technology, and there was a whole bunch of things in there that I thought I'd like to dig into, but I thought I'd ask you to give me your abstract, let's call it, kind of the session about the big themes that you were talking about.
Absolutely. So at a high level, what we're exploring is that we're in a technology wave.
Mm-hmm.
When you're in a technology wave in the middle of it, you don't have the benefit of hindsight. So it's very hard to see what are all the new ways of doing things that are now unlocked, the new paradigms, the new patterns.
Mm-hmm.
And so most people are applying the previous way of doing things just now with new technology. So if you look at cloud computing, for most people, for a long time it was, I don't have to keep a server in my IT closet or a co-location facility. Now I can make a virtual machine out of it and put it in the cloud.
Mm-hmm.
And they still treated it, once they did that, like it was the same server that was in their IT closet. It took a long time for people to say, oh no, I have elastic fluid services now, and I can do developer ops and all these kinds of things that weren't possible before.
Mm-hmm.
We're in the same place.
Okay.
And so the question that we're exploring is really, what are all these new things? What is the new mental model I need to have so that I can start to think about how that changes the nature of what I'm doing at Fulville?
I mean, I think what's fascinating in that is how people are talking about the idea about reimagining your business with the use of kind of AI rather than just using it as a bolt-on.
Yep, that's right.
But based on what you've said, that becomes a fundamental kind of challenge, because you actually don't understand, because you're using old frames of reference in a new frame.
That's right.
And I guess my question would be, so how do we develop a new frame?
So, no, it's a good question. Ultimately, building that mental model of what's now possible is the key to unlocking that. There isn't a shortcut. I wish I could tell you those. I wish I could tell you there was a shortcut. But it's not so far afield that we can't start thinking in that way.
Right.
Ultimately, we live and breathe our businesses. We know them very well. The mental models we have for our own businesses are deep.
Mm-hmm.
The current AI technology doesn't have that understanding of your business.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the role that we all now play is, can we build that understanding, that mental model for these systems? And then once you've done that so that it can understand it, now what services can I expose so that they can be consumed and paired with other services?
Yeah.
The easiest mental frame I can give anyone to kind of understand this is, if you had a really good assistant, whether it's a personal assistant or an executive assistant, what have you, you have a really good assistant, they have to understand how you work.
Yep.
They have to understand how you live. They have to understand what you do day to day. Once they understand that, they can go and say, okay, well, in order to achieve whatever you've asked them to do, I need to go to these half a dozen different places and sources, and I need to do all these different things. And then I can come back with whatever the result is from that. The current crop of technologies just enables AI systems to do that on your behalf. But in order for that to work, going to all those places, that might be one of those data sources you have. It might be some capability or service that you provide.
Mm-hmm.
We still need to work across the variety of what it is to get it done.
Yeah.
But we have to expose all of those things so they can be consumed in that way.
Yeah.
And then once you've done that, now the magic can happen. But the industry as a whole has to stand all that up. And that's actively what is happening at the moment, is we're all reimagining, not as bolt-on, as you said, but as if people were going to use my service because their personal assistant was going to do it, how would I expect to interface with that? Okay, now I just have to think about, they're not coming and clicking on my website or my dashboard or my mobile app. They're asking their agent to do it. Their agent it happens to be an AI autonomous, system, but it's no different. It's, how would I expose that to the agent?
So do you think it might be then, rather than actually because this is a thing that I've been thinking about, is that too often there are people that describe their businesses as being, I don't know, we're data-driven decision-making kind of organization, or we're AI first, or AI tech-led, or all these different things. But the problem is those are not ends in of themselves.
No.
They are inputs.
It's just technology that enables things.
Right.
All it is.
And then data that kind of fuels, it becomes the fuel. And so I had this theory that actually, because they are just inputs in service of like an envisioned end, and I always think, well, actually, envisioning your experience, so starting with the customer and then trying to imagine, you understand where they are now and how you'd like to imagine how you'd like to serve them in the future, taking off all the shackles of technology, you just almost just like get sci-fi on your kind of like, oh, your ass, as it were. And then almost like work backwards from there, because then you start to be able to infer kind of what's possible now and when it might become possible. Do you think that's possibly a better way of trying to approach it in terms of creating that new frame, as it were?
It's a sensible approach to take. I do think that there's a certain, like if we're all being very candid and honest with ourselves, there is a certain measure of everyone wants to present as though they've got the forward looking, we've got all these things, look at all the new ways we're doing it. In reality, everyone is flying the plane while they're building it. I mean, they don't, like that's just the reality of the market as it stands right now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not different for the underlying AI tech. Some of these things that we have to do to provide rich context and everything across different companies, we have to build all the protocols and standards and collaborations to do all of that. It's all happening. Mm-hmm. But we're all in that boat. We're all building the plane while we're flying the plane. So the more honest we can be with ourselves in terms of, okay, yeah, we're figuring this out. We've got to go explore how all these things will be used. I think that's a huge benefit. As you said, these things are inputs. They are. It's really important that people don't forget the objective is not the technology. The technology enables achieving the objective. Mm-hmm. The objective is whatever the value you're trying to provide to your customers, your employees, what have you, whatever that is, that's the objective.
Yeah.
It's easy to lose sight of that with all these new tech waves and say, oh, but I have to check the box that says I have AI in there.
Yeah. Or the dog have up, and it's like, it's the latest squirrel that comes along. It's like, oh, squirrel.
Yes. And I've watched this happen through numerous technology waves over decades. Yes. That part isn't different this time than it was before.
No.
This is just the latest incarnation of it.
But and in your talk, you talked about these 4 themes: the sort of dynamism, context, in the moment, predictive. These are the things that are, if you like, 4 big themes that are starting to manifest themselves into sort of experiences, and we're going to end up defining kind of the experiences that we're going to be able to deliver to customers. Can you help me understand quickly kind of a little bit about each of those?
Yeah. So dynamism is about having things being able to react to novel situations.
Right.
That's it. So before, you might have a script that something needs to follow, or a customer service interaction or whatever. Now you don't necessarily have to abide the script, but you still want to have the level of control and trust in all of those pieces. So dynamism is about how do you build all of that? How do you get those pieces to orchestrate with one another? Context is, okay, even though I can do that, it's not useful if I don't understand the nature of the business or what I'm trying to do, or the individual who we're interacting with at this particular moment. Being able to provide that level of detail and the mental models for that is key there. So the easy story for that one is we're also steeped in our business that we often forget that other people don't have that frame for understanding it all.
Yeah.
The AI doesn't have that frame for understanding it all. It just doesn't.
Yes.
Someone has to teach it.
Yeah.
And
but no, kind of, it doesn't matter. I don't care how big your LLM is. If it's like an external LLM, it doesn't know squat about your business until you train it.
Until you tell it about your business, right? So how do you do that? That's what the context piece is about. In the moment is about shifting expectations from all of our customers. one of the things that all of the AI technology makes possible now is everything's like, I'm sure everyone has this notion that everything feels like it's moving faster. It is, things are moving faster, but that shifts our expectations to, okay, but why do I have to wait until after I had this bad experience,
right,
or the good experience, whatever, for the feedback from that experience to get into the system so we can do something about it? Why can't I understand in the moment that it's happening what's going on? And once I'm there, how do I enable people to do something about it?
Right.
That's what the in the moment is about.
Okay.
And then predictive is, okay, great. Now we've got all those three pieces. If I want to know what to do about it, how can I do that in an intelligent way? If I offer you these three different remediation paths, which one should I pick? Which one is more likely to be successful? How would I know that? So those are the four different lenses. How can I reframe the way I think about things going forward, where everything is going to be more dynamic?
Yeah.
Rich context is super important for everyone. I expect it to happen while I'm experiencing whatever it is. And I would hope that you would be able to have some intelligence about what we can do about these things that is going to provide me with a better experience ultimately.
And I just want to drill down on the context bit, because you went hard on the statement, like in the AI first era, context wins every time, and then you actually went on to say context is the new gold.
Yep.
I'm like, and I've heard that kind of before, and I'm a bit like, yeah, when I've not heard it before, but I heard the thing around context and people kind of like drilling in on context. Is that the kind of the most near term sort of battlefield, as it were, in terms of competition between experiences? Because when I think about context, I also going to it maps back to personalization in a lot of ways, because the more context you have, the better the kind of the personalized kind of service, whether it's anonymized or named, doesn't really kind of matter. If you have the context, then it can just be a better thing if you understand kind of where people are at and what's happening. How near or far off are we being able to sort of achieve or to dial up the resolution on that? If you know what I mean.
So the reality of where that's at today in the industry as a whole is a lot of tooling and capability is being built out to enable people to provide that rich context. That's the current state. The tooling itself is being built.
Right.
We're not even at the stage where everyone's filling in, like, here's all the semantics for how you understand this data or whatnot.
What about the source of the data as well? Because sometimes that data sits on other things that are owned by other people.
100%.
Like, including customers.
That's right. And so this is why you see these emergent standards like OSI, this open semantic interchange, so that we can all collectively, once we've built these rich understandings, have it be beneficial to the customer. And the reality is, to solve any challenge that we're facing, it seldom lives in one silo.
Right.
That's very rare.
Yeah.
Oftentimes you need to go to half a dozen different sources, half of which might not even be part of your organization, in order to provide that capability. This is recognized. The industry knows this is happening.
Right.
So we have to build all the technology to make that possible. We have to build the tools to enable people to provide the context. The technology vendors aren't the ones who understand the context for your business either.
Yeah.
They can give you the tools so that you can help the systems understand that context. But that's the reality of where everything is at. But there's a general recognition, to your earlier question, there's a general recognition that the major differentiating capability that people will have is, okay, I can offer this service, but how can I offer this service in a way where we understand you, we understand the nature of what you're trying to do, we understand all this data that you have, your preferences, all of that coming together. And so people are trying very hard to build up these effectively moats where they're saying, hey, we have all this data. That's the new asset. The new asset is this context we can provide on everything. It's not just the capability. Increasingly, some of those capabilities will be automated, but the context can't be automated.
Right.
So,
and last couple of kind of questions for me. This is all, I mean, and I'll get nerdy on this, and I try and kind of keep up because I'm interested in it. But if I was to ask you, like, what are some of the biggest kind of like challenges or risks that companies face when trying to kind of be more sort of dynamic, more contextual, kind of more in the moment, more predictive and things? What are some of the big kind of challenges that they need to, or big risks they need to avoid, and what things they need to do in order to set themselves up for success, as we ever mean?
So the biggest one is just starting to think about things through the new lens. Again, any technology wave, you're in the middle of it. You're thinking about using the old lens with the new tech. Mm-hmm. The biggest challenge is, can I increasingly get my organization to understand the new lens?
Right.
And once we understand the new lens, then we can start to reimagine, what shape could this take? Now, once you understand that new lens, then everybody has to go through the transformation process of, well, what does that mean for my business?
Right.
So that would be the biggest thing, is just how can we get the new, it's overused, so I hate to use the word paradigm, but it's the right word to use. What is this new paradigm that we find ourselves in? How does this work? What is different now for my business in this age?
It's like, I tell you what, it's an alternative way of describing it. A new operating model.
There you go. I like that. That works.
Because there's a kind of a practical thing.
Yes. So being able to do that reimagining. Then the next biggest challenge everyone's going to face is, okay, I can stand up these new novel ways of doing everything. Mm-hmm. Also, I have all of this existing stuff that everyone is depending on that doesn't go away.
Yes.
Yeah. So how do we navigate from here to there? How do we bring everyone along? Part of what you will find in a lot of the industry broadly right now is startups don't have any of that legacy. So they seem like they can go faster.
Yeah.
And people get worried about that because it's like, oh, well, they can be so nimble in doing all of these things. They also don't have the giant established base of...
They also don't have the brand equity.
Yes.
And they don't have that sort of that surety that comes with that, which is where I always think that people get really antsy about, there's a disruptor, and then that means that they think all their customers are going to like switch kind of like tomorrow.
Yes.
It's a bit like, back in the day, this is quite a relevant thing for Qualtrics. You remember the time when feedback or asking your customers for feedback was like a new thing, and many companies resisted it because they thought, well, actually, why would we ask our customers kind of like what they think? Because they're just going to shout at us.
Yeah.
And you think about it and just go, well, that's ridiculous.
Yes.
Because like, why is it not a line of people down the street knocking on your door, getting ready to shout at you? It's like one of these false expectations appearing real, right? Yeah, no, because managing that sort of that transition, because it's no different from, I think, in any other sort of transformation, because actually you've almost got to, it's sort of like twin track things. There's the new thing, and then there's the old thing, and then you've got to trying to migrate more of the old thing onto the new thing, replatforming and whatever it might kind of be. And so it's an old and familiar challenge where there's just a new...
That's right. This is no different from previous tech waves where the same kind of thing happened in that sense. What I would encourage people to think about when they're starting to go on this journey is there's going to be this, and this is also true with previous tech waves, so this is not novel too. There's going to be this pressure where it's like, all of this, the world will be different in 6 months. If we're not there in 6 months, we're toast. We're toast. The reality is we can put the technology out in 6 months. That doesn't mean the world moved to the new technology in 6 months, right? Or a year or 18 months or whatever it happens to be. We all collectively have to make that transformation. And that happens at a industry level. That happens at a society level. That's not a technology level thing. No. The technology is just there to enable it. And so I have to encourage even people on my own team where they get very excited about the newest, latest technology and how it's going to change everything. And I'm like, it will. Also, we have to make sure that we are keeping pace with how quickly that can be adopted, how quickly that transformation can happen. Yeah. It is happening faster in this wave than perhaps in some of the previous ones, but it's also not happening at the pace where all of this is going to be completely upended 6 months from now. So
No, I think there is a reality where it's like some people are not as far advanced or as ready to change as the industry commentary kind of might suggest.
of course.
And if we think back to other sort of technological ways, I think about the .com kind of like boom and bust sort of thing back in the turn of the century. The thing that struck me out of that was that when you see things rise and then fall, there's always been a difference between what probably will happen, what possibly could happen. And I think the same probably holds kind of here. You've got to kind of almost say, I'm not saying you should dampen excitement and ambition, but there's a reality of like, some people can't just go from here and make that quantum leap. And you almost have to take like steps at a time and be realistic and understand that it's like, it's a journey that you're on.
100%. The other thing that I would encourage people to think about, because this has been very consistent throughout technology waves over many decades now, is people consistently overestimate the near term and underestimate the long term.
Sure.
It's very consistent. So as much as you're concerned about, if we don't do this in the next 3-6 months, we're toast. Also, the things that you're envisioning for 2 years it's probably going to be even crazier than that, than you're thinking. So we all want to be on that journey together. We all want to help do this transformation and realize all the new things that we can do. But it's a collective activity.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. My pleasure.
Lovely to meet you.
Yeah.
Well, that was another great conversation. Big thanks to Mark for sharing some really fantastic insights. I mean, a couple of things that really stood out for me from my conversation with him include how AI doesn't understand your business yet, and how context is the new gold. I mean, lots to think about in that conversation. So without dwelling on it, let's get into my next chat. And this time I'm going to be speaking to Assaf Keren. This is the next segment of the podcast I've been recording at Qualtrics X4. I am with Assaf Keren, I believe. Is that right? The Chief Security Officer at Qualtrics. Assaf, tell me a little bit about what you do. Chief Security Officer, that feels like you might be in charge of bodyguards or something.
Actually, also.
Okay, yeah. So dual role.
My most lamented role is telling execs that they need to actually have protection. But that is a side, not a side. Let me take a step back. Yeah, my role is to protect the company. And that is inclusive of the physical security of the operators and facility.
The broader thing, not just at a technology level.
Yes, and enable the company to serve our customers.
Right.
In the sense of building a layer of trust. And we try to look at it in a holistic manner. Right. So cybersecurity is one element of that, and physical security, more employee forward, but is a second layer of that. Okay. In the sense of how do we think about creating an environment where our employees, our customers, our company is protected, and we're enabling the business to do what it needs to.
I love that you've mentioned the word trust, because I'm really interested in just service experience and the things that we do to try and help people have better service and better experience. And time and time again, it's in the research, it's shown up that trust is one of the biggest barriers to adoption of new technology, both at an organizational level and also at a customer level. And I wonder if, one, you agree, and if you do, then how are you approaching building that trust at both the organizational level and also helping organizations do that at the customer kind of level?
Yeah. Well, I have I've had really good playground not playground, like a learning experience through my career on trust, because I have, in my history, I've led the building security for the Israeli e-government.
Okay.
Which is the governmental service organization, which is highly dependent on trust. And then I was the chief security officer in PayPal.
Okay.
Which is entirely a trust. It's about money, but it's more about trust.
Well, exactly. I mean, it's a bit like you're applying the same values and demands that to someone like PayPal that you would do to your bank.
Yes.
So you can go and you give them the money, and you're like going, I expect you to look after my money.
Yeah. No, PayPal succeeded because let's take the last 20 years out of the equation and let's look at the first 3 years of its success. It was brand new internet thing.
Yes.
You didn't know what to make out of it. You didn't trust any of it. And then there came a company that says, we will take care of you and build trust with you.
We'll be the bridge.
And we'll be the bridge. So you don't have to put your credit card everywhere. We'll be your credit card provider. And if something happens, we'll take care of it. So the impetus of trust in that conversation, I want to avoid monopolizing trust as a security concept, because it's not.
No.
It's security, and it's availability, and it's reliability, and it's resiliency, and it's also about taking care of your customer when you need to take care of your customer.
100%.
And I think that point, PayPal did that very well to build that rapport of trust. Now, when you think about a company like Qualtrics, one of the reasons why I'm here is because a good customer experience program actually allows, if you do it right, allows you to build trust with your customer, because you know where they're hurting and you're able to do the right thing to support them.
Yes.
And I think security has a lens to play within that role of building trust. Now, when you think about B2B, which is where most of my operations is, like when I think about how do I represent Qualtrics Trust, the company, in front of our customers, most of our customers are businesses.
Yes.
Or all of our customers are businesses. And because of that, it's a lot of B2B work. And there it relies a lot more about, in my mind, about transparency. It relies on certification. And it relies on showcasing that you're doing the right things for them. And when there are disagreements, what I found counterproductive is to agree to something that you're not going to.
How we understand that?
If somebody comes and says, I want you to do X, and you think it's the wrong thing to do.
Right, okay.
And coming and saying, okay, we'll do that for you, and you do a one-off for somebody, I think actually destroys trust in the long-term perspective. Actually being able to come in and say,
what's an integrity type of thing?
It's an integrity, but even more than that, what you are asking us to do is counterproductive to your security.
Right.
We do not want to do that. And we want to sell, but we will not do something that is counterproductive to your security. And sadly, I've had more than 5 these examples this year.
Right, okay.
And saying, we will require you to do, or not require, we will not serve you in the way you're asking us to serve you, because we think that is not okay. You should be doing the work, not us.
Right.
And sometimes that actually gets in the way of a deal, which is fine.
Yeah.
But I think long term, we build a better rapport and conversation with those security.
Well, you know what you stand for.
Yeah. And one of the things I've done when I got in, we had a team that, just the nature of our security services in B2B, you have a team of people that were doing questionnaires.
Okay.
So they would wake up in the morning, they had 14 questionnaires from customers they had to fill them. They would go to their body of text and then copy and paste and copy and paste and copy and paste. And we actually enabled AI to do most of the copy and pasting.
Right.
And now that team is doing what we call customer trust.
Okay.
So they are a customer engagement team that talks with the security team, that talks to the security team and creates knowledge and publishes white papers and best practices, and helps drive the conversation between our security practitioners or our security customers and the product team, and where there are misses, and really build that rapport, because that is a massive area of building trust with our customers.
Yes.
Even to the CX practitioners, helping them navigate their security teams. Because in the larger organizations, my role is to help the CX practitioner to get to yes from their security team fast.
I mean, I think, but the thing is that if you're operating at that level with your customers, so it's largely B2B, then you're trying to help the CX practitioners within their environment so that they can deal with their own sort of security team. But then at the same time, you're trying to help the CX practitioners within your clients to actually help their end customers. It all kind of flows down.
Yeah, it all flows down. And you said something that is really, really right. And I think that in this day and age is very interesting. It's kind of a dichotomy that we live in, where people are binary on who they trust.
Yes.
So if you trust a vendor or a brand, you will trust them and you give them all of your data. But if you don't trust them, you will not give them any of your data and not use them. And now, because of the AI shifted so much of the industry, it's shifting all of the time. So people are re-establishing the barriers of what they trust. Maybe in 2 to 3 years, it will be a lot more contained.
Maybe in 2 to 3 years, every customer will have their own agent, and then it'll be like the
agent I will trust.
They'll be have a graphic equalizer around kind of who I trust and in what domain and kind of what sort of thing, and so that, and then that will just change the environment completely.
Yeah, but that's the way you interact. But in the end, I think that there will be a new barrier of like who you trust, because out of the bat now, if you look at the new AI hyperscalers, OpenAI and then Anthropic, people trust them now. People share a lot of data with them. Right or wrong, we'll see in 3 years as there are more incidents, breaches, privacy, legal, all of those. I'm not saying any of them will, I'm not naming names, but I think this new frontier is shaking a lot of that trust boundary. But we're also, we did a CX trend report, and what we're seeing is that people want personalization. They are looking for that hyper-personalized experience that AI can give them. But at the same time, they're really worried about what's going to happen with the data.
But here's the interesting thing, because so that phenomenon is not new. About 10 years ago, there was some research that came out, and it was the same sort of stuff that came out when we had the explosion of big data and analytics stuff about 10 years ago. I remember it was like, wow, that's good, amazing. But like, I'm not so sure. I'm going to give you all this thing. And Forrester came out with a piece of research that they talked about that it's a personalization paradox. They said that there's 75% of customers at that time were saying, yeah, we want all of this.
Yeah.
But then there was nearly 60% of them said, but we're really kind of nervous about giving away our data and the security there of it, and maybe kind of like cyber breaches or identity theft or just being generally intrusive.
Yeah.
But then there was also another layer in that, with another piece of research that says that whilst marketeers wanted to try and deliver more personalized kind of experience, customers really agreed. Many of the marketeers, about 60% of the marketeers admitted that some of the tactics that they'd employed, they would have characterized them as being creepy. So they'd almost like overstep their own bounds. Yeah. And so there's an ethics, a professional conduct thing within this as well, because I can't remember who was on the stage. I think it was Sandra from the LA Raiders said that trust is, even increasingly today, trust is hard to win, but so easy to lose. And so it'd be fun. It's like, I mean, what would be your advice to people? If people listening in and going like, oh yeah, trust is the thing, and security and transparency and conduct and ethics, and those are all just inputs into this cloud that is trust. What would be your advice to them to say, to get to almost because it's a journey, you've got to build up the muscles, as it were.
Look, I think I used to have a chief risk officer that used to say, look at it as if it's going to be published in the Wall Street Journal. And now incidents will happen. And there will be some sort of mistake that somebody will make, and the model that we built or somebody else built will give the wrong answer, or there will be something that will be left open, etc. But if you do the right things, fundamentally do the right things, and you communicate well and you're transparent, and if in case of a trust loss incident, you say, this is what happened, this is what we're doing about it, this is how we're fixing it, and this is how we're making it right for our customers. And you did genuinely, not trying to
Crisis manage the situation.
or even shove it away.
Don't ignore it.
Then you turn the page on an opportunity to build more trust, even though you had something that happened. Now try to do your best, because what you don't want to happen is when the Wall Street Journal reports on the facts of the incident, it will look like you didn't do the basics.
Sure.
So striving to do the fundamentals well, striving to do all the checks that you want to do. And if it's something that's genuinely surprising, or something that is genuinely you've done your best, then the world will forgive you and will work with you.
Yeah.
If it's not, and people perceive you to be disingenuous in that kind of situation, that's the biggest trust loss driver.
I think that's fair. It comes back to the best gauge of it is, I think, if you ask yourself, who do you trust in your personal life? What sort of characters, what sort of behavior do you trust? And it's the people that are credible, that are reliable, that are steadfast, that are honest, that are open, that are transparent, those sort of things. However much you might not like what they say, but at least you can go, yeah, I get what I see.
And when they make a mistake, you know that a mistake and not a pattern, and they admit it, and they're willing to have a conversation about how to make it better, right? And I don't think that we should treat our customers any way different than that. I think a lot of companies get into overpromise, underdeliver in that space. I love when website says we have bank grade security, or military grade security, and I used to work for the government. No, don't say that. I know.
Yeah, no,
That's more free.
So I think that, I think you're absolutely kind of right. I mean, there's some fundamentals kind of things that they do. I mean, trust is an issue, and it's real, both at an organizational level in terms of technology adoption and security and privacy and all those different things, and it's real at a consumer kind of level. And to ignore it is to ignore an opportunity, I think. And therefore, you have to lean into it. But then, I guess one of the things that it strikes me that companies can do is, rather than just talking about trust, is be more trustful yourself. So if you embody the behavior that you want to build, then you're more likely to be successful.
Yeah, I think, especially in this day and age, I think I said it in the morning in a session. Unless you are of a cohort of up to 10 companies around the world, okay, you will have to use third-party vendors. And building a relationship and a partnership with your vendors, and really coming to it as a partnership in building this ecosystem of environments that is going to help you build a product that will drive trust is really important. And that means that you have to treat them in the same way. You have to identify which companies you want to work with. You want to make sure that they share your ethics, you share your transparency, they share your care. But then it becomes a shared fate. Because I think we went through this in the cloud transformation when we shifted from shared, everybody had their own servers, to shared fate, shared accountability. Even more so now, like the models are the models, and an impact based on the model for one company is going to destroy the entire chain. Not just the entire chain of company A using model A, using built by hyperscaler.
Yeah,
is that every other company using this model now will have to deal with it, with the after effects of what happened there.
Yeah.
I think we got a really interesting glimpse into it in the recent wars between Anthropic and the Pentagon.
Yeah.
And I'm not taking any sides in that, but what happens when you have somebody like us, which we provide services to the U.S. government, what happens when they say you can't use Anthropic anymore? How do you manage that supply chain?
Sure.
What is the trust factor? What do other people think about that?
Well, then I guess and then if you kind of zoom out and look at it kind of like in a much broader sort of geographical sets, then you start thinking about sovereign data and sovereign AI and sovereign software and all of that sort of stuff, and then it becomes even more complicated.
Yeah, I think it's already complicated.
Well,
but but it will be. It will be. I think there was this attempt at national clouds, which still is an attempt in some places. It's not the best The pros and cons. Data sovereignty is a pro in places. The resiliency problems it brings with it are a con in other places. It will be very interesting in this day and age where the data has become the new moat, not the model. I don't think the models matter anymore. I think the models are very interesting and nice and great, etc., and we'll all use them, but they'll be commoditized to a point.
Yep.
And every other month we'll have a new model that will be more intelligent and better and faster, etc., and this is great. Well, almost like Moore's law will become the new chipsets. It will become the new CPUs that you operate on. The data is going to be the interesting piece, but now you're getting into a real problem that the industry needs to solve, which is how much data can you actually use to train on when you're a company that's collecting data? How much belongs for the customers? How do you drive those things? How do you create the shared value for both the customer and the company to build that capability? And overlay on top of the sovereignty issues, and then you get into a really
it's getting really complicated, because particularly you've been talking over the last kind of day or so about synthetic data and how you create that or synthetic personas, not synthetic data, but you're training it on this real data that's been created by doing research with actual human beings, and then you can model that and then extrapolate from that, but then you've got to keep refreshing kind of that, and you look and go, that's a lot of data.
Yeah.
And a lot of permissions around kind of using the data, and then, as you say, creating the value kind of out of that. And it's like, you can only do that by either being explicit about permissions and about ownership and about value sharing and all these own.
Yeah.
And that has to be about partnership.
It has to be about that.
Because it can't be done in secret. It can't be done in secret.
No, it's not done in secret. Specifically, synthetic is an interesting one because we've done a lot of first-party research. So we actually went out and did the research to build the model for synthetic, which is our data.
Is that quant or qual or both?
I think it's both, but I need to ask the MR team, because
I'm going to speak to Ali tomorrow, so I got to ask Ali about that.
But the general statement stands in which, and we never use direct customer data. We always anonymize and aggregate on top. So there is nothing that is specific to a customer in the data.
Right.
But still, in order for us to provide better value, we need to use that data. And here's always a conversation.
Yeah.
On what value you're driving for us and how are you using this data and how we're learning. And then we have customers that opt out from that.
Right.
And that's fine, because we want to have the conversation. We would love to get to is
black cat approval to use all of that sort of thing.
Yeah, but coming from a place that the value is good and they trust us. And that would be my goal. My personal goal as chief security officer is where I succeeded, where all of our customers approve us as a vendor within a week, and that they trust us enough to say, we trust you to anonymize and to aggregate and to use this data to give us better outcomes. It happens most of the time.
Right.
Most of the time, a high percent.
Yeah.
But we still have another subjective gap to melt and go.
Well, that's great to hear, Ren. But thank you for sharing some of your thoughts and your insights with me. That's been, it's interesting, because I think trust is this massive thing, and oftentimes we don't really dig into it, sort of thing. And it's it operates at all sorts of different different levels. So thank you for sharing your perspective.
I'll tell you that one thing I'm fortunate is that the company gets this, and most of the places I've been in my journey get this. So it's very easy to have a conversation about how are we building trust in the platform. It's all an afterthought.
Yeah.
Where I talk to some of my peers in the industry, and it's not that clear.
Yeah.
I've been fortunate in my career so far.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I also, again, another conversation which I really enjoyed, and but particularly really enjoyed the insight that Assaf gave us into his role and his views on trust, and particularly the role it plays at both an organizational and a customer level. And again, before I start going down a rabbit hole and musing further on that, let's keep going and get into my next and final chat. This time I'm speaking with Ali Henriques, who again is the Global Senior Director of Market Research at Qualtrics. And this is another installment. I'm super pleased to meet Henriques, who is the Global Senior Director of Market Research at Qualtrics, who I've seen on stage from afar, previous X4s, but now I get to sit across the table from you and ask you and say, well, welcome to the Punk CX podcast.
Wonderful. Glad to be here.
You're welcome. And now as the event is coming to a close, I guess, we're on the downhill slope now. Tell me, what's been some of your highlights from the event so far?
Yeah, it's such a great question. This is my easily 10th X4. So I was client before. I've attended when it was called Summit.
Right.
And now X4, not in my home city, which is mildly annoying, but my Salt Lake City based.
Right. Okay.
But I've gotten over that. It's funny that you mentioned as we first met the evolution of what X4 has meant. There are a couple of things that I think are unique to us and will never go away. Things like Dream Team and things like it bringing some really high impact, just cool stuff to our attendees that I've come to love and enjoy every single time. What I'd say this one's different for a number of reasons. First time in Seattle, it's a beautiful venue. It's new to all of us. I think it's attracted a new attendee base too, slightly different. So Salt Lake isn't maybe as accessible to everybody, and so there's a lot of great tech here too. So I think it's been fun for me. I've met a lot of new clients that I've just never come across before. From a content perspective, I think we are striking a very different balance. We're not talking inwardly about what we're building and how we're building it and about
And I speak to Brad about that, and he said when he did his keynote, he was a bit like, I feel slightly nervous that I'm not going to go on and do a demo.
Isn't it strange? Yeah, every single time, he's shouted out the poor SE who's typing live on stage, right? We've all been there, right? Seen Brad do that. It was a very different tone and tenor for him, but and I haven't gotten feedback yet, but personally found it more relatable, right?
Okay.
The types of things we're talking about over the years too. We've maybe broken content a bit too much into silos of even on main stage, CX, EX, and MR, and instead, we're focusing a bit more on what unites us and our framework of listen, understand, act. Is something that we can all apply to our day-to-days. So I think we've come a long way with that and finding more unifying content. There are fewer celebs, which is a little bit sad.
Yeah.
But, they're incredibly inspiring leaders, right, in different organizations. The Raiders, God, Sandra was fantastic.
Yep.
I love to leave inspired, right, by new clients as well as just new faces and voices on stage.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it struck me, and I speak to Brad about this because I was really interested about the change in sort of direction, I say in inverted commas. But he said, well, actually, we're almost like drinking our own champagne or eating our own dog food, because you got feedback from last year, and people were saying, actually, we need to see stuff that's a bit more relatable. They're like almost like cases that are like us or maybe just in front of us, and that we can aspire to that. And I think that's fascinating because actually I think there's a mood in the market, that's what I'm seeing, is that a lot of people are excited by the technology kind of development and the possibilities of it, but sometimes it feels like it's a bus that's accelerating off into the distance, and then like going, did I just miss the bus? Or we're not ready to get on the bus? And it's a bit like aligning yourself with their kind of journey, as it were, which is brilliant. And I think it's a really interesting shift and actually quite different to other vendor events, I think. So that's good. But the thing that I wanted to get slightly nerdy about, because there was an announcement that, and it's around, particularly in your area, which is MR, market research, and about synthetic panels, so I hate the name because it feels a bit Westworld or kind of like Blade Runner or something.
No, it's gross. I mean, it's gross.
Right.
I like simulations.
Right. Okay. So tell me about that and how they kind of like work, because I know there's lots of talk about people creating kind of data, synthetic data, particularly to populate kind of these big kind of models. But there's more to it than that. And I want you to help me understand about that, because just to see how valuable they could be.
Yeah, I love it. Synthetic's not our word, right? I mean, we've had synthetic oils and synthetic materials, and so sadly, it just means fake, and that's not accurate, right? So if I rewind, right, 20 years ago, I was a customer of Qualtrics. I was at Royal Caribbean. I'm telling you this story because our history is really important to not only explaining what it is and how it works, but how we've interacted with our clients over these past couple of decades.
Right.
So when I was there, I had my own database of customers, guests, right, that I could reach out to and ask about just about anything. But I said, I'm really curious why travelers don't take cruises. And so I need access to 500 prospective cruisers. And I called my panels rep at Qualtrics, and that's the birthplace of the team that I'm with now. And I said, yeah, no problem. We'll get you this from third-party panel sources, right? So that's how I get access to audiences I don't have in my database. That's really, I think, the cleanest way to even define and describe what market research is in our terms.
Yeah.
And so the nature of the work that we've done with clients and commissioned ourselves over, these now 2 decades has something to do with advancing a product or a service, right? Just like I was, what destinations do you visit? Do you stay in all-inclusives? And, what do you think about this type of package or, private island experience? And how should we price it? Something to do with competition, right? So sticking with the Royal example, how often are you going to casinos? How often are you going to the, and why? And why do you spend money there and not with us? And then finally, audience exploration. I want to understand the multi-generational travelers and, why they choose what they choose and, what motivations and behaviors are unique to them. So that's the nature of the research that we do in partnership with our clients and, again, commission ourselves for our own thought leadership. That's what's then used to train and tune the model. So the way that the model works is at its core, very thin layer of publicly available LLM. So it could be Llama, it could be Claude, it could be ChatGPT, one of those. It's thin, it's important context. It gives us, worldview,
Right. Okay.
bigger, broader than this next layer, which is 90 to 95% survey tuned data.
Right.
Across those 3 camps that I was just describing. Now extrapolate that across 20 plus industries, right? We've got automotive and we've got, consumer packaged goods and we've got travel and hospitality. That's the nature of the data that we've used to train and tune the model.
So you're almost, as you say, let me just frame this and make sure I understand it. So you're using almost some of the large language models, pick your, whichever one you can, and as you say, for world context. Then you're building in, I guess, a small language kind of model.
That's right.
That is built on actual human insight that's been kind of commissioned across either your customer base or stuff that you've done your kind of like self. And obviously you'll have anonymized it and aggregated it and all these different things that got the right sort of permissions for it. And you build a model which you can then interrogate and go, if we did this, how would that work? Or how would people respond?
Yep, back to the what if counterfactual.
Okay.
That's exactly it.
Right.
And so the way that the model works is we like to think of it as a representation of human behavior, right? If it's U.S. consumer right now, what we learned early on, this is a year and a half long journey, right, of a lot of scientific experimentation and then model build. Throwing more data at it did not yield better results. Right. We reached a point of diminishing return pretty quickly, and it was instead I tell you about the nature of the work that we do with clients, because that randomness and that breadth and that depth of industry kind of coverage is what turned out to be incredibly valuable to model performance. And so if you think about accuracy and validity, right, the way that Ali, the self-described research nerd, would want to see this is alongside to it, right? So we're still in this right now, guys, comparing collected human panel data. I'm going to run it through synthetic. How does it look?
Right.
And it's not just visually on a chart seeing bars side by side. The way that we're measuring it, we're looking at a couple of different statistical measures of variability of the data, because humans are irrational and unpredictable, and we all have very distinct human lived experiences. We want to represent that in the data as well.
Okay.
Models tend to centralize and around a point.
So they also hold things fixed.
That's exactly right.
Right. So it's you can have two different people, I guess, that have the same They might go through the same journey or the same experience, but they could have had 2 very different days. How they respond to that is beyond the control of a constructed kind of model, because that's just something that's a very individual kind of like thing.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And so all that context, right? We don't have that necessarily in the survey data, but you can start to discern, right, these patterns and behaviors. And so, but what's also incredibly rich in our data set is I ask my product diagnostic questions very differently from you, right? And so, and it's learned, what outcome we're trying to drive ultimately. So we measure performance across the variability of the data. And then in conversation with clients, very colloquially, would I have come to the same conclusion? Would I have made the same decision with synthetic as I did with human?
Right.
So we're measuring that in a couple of different ways, but then most simply are the same top 3 responses the same across human and synthetic, right? And if so, great. I would have come to the same conclusion.
Okay.
So those are the types of measures that we're looking at around accuracy and validity. When we think about application and where we guide clients in good fit, bad fit, there are still plenty of bad fit examples and use cases. Dinner last night, right? There's no way that the model could know how quick the service was, temperature of the food, and what the general ambiance was, and all of those types of temporally relevant past lived experiences are not a good fit for synthetic.
Okay.
So instead, where we see great performance and success is future focus, likelihood to purchase, invest, fill in the blank, and appeal of a product or a service. So Likert scale, future tense, all of those are quite good.
What if scenarios type of thing.
Exactly right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how is it being received by the sort of the market research sort of community? Because some people might kind of turn around and go, that I used to do that and I enjoyed doing that. Because I think that's the adoption is interesting, particularly if you're running things that's kind of side by side.
You're right. There are elements that, and certainly, right, this is AI is posing a risk threat to many knowledge workers, right? Researchers are certainly not excluded. There are, though, plenty of things that I've had to do in the 20 plus years I've been a researcher that I really wish I didn't have to.
Right.
And I'll quote a client from just this week. I was in a room of PhD researchers. She said, that guy's building charts in PowerPoint, right? I don't want him building charts in PowerPoint. I want him advising the business on, in a strategic investment.
Yeah.
And so you're right. There are certain things we want to shed ourselves of and never look back on.
Sure.
And there are other things where we're going to, dig our heels in the ground and say, this is mine, damn it. And I've been, built my reputation doing this. So the researchers, believe it or not, there was a lot more resistance last year. Same time last year, X4 last year. A lot more objection to how could this possibly be? And we were newer, right? One of the first coming to market with it. So there wasn't quite the groundswell in support that we have now. Instead, this year, fast forward, I walk into almost every single client conversation, not having to defend, not having to explain, not having to justify, but rather guide.
Right.
Can I do this? Can I use it for that? And have we thought about this? Do you have any, case studies around that? It's beyond curiosity. It's, I know I need to do this. Help me with what we've talked a lot about even today is there will always be study types, audiences that have to be human, right?
Yeah.
And so the researcher's role now becomes a bit more of this orchestrator of consult this data source for that, use this data source for this, and that might be operational data, that might be CX data, that might be synthetic, and it might be, human crawl.
Sure. But I also think there's correct me if I'm wrong, I think there's a distinction kind of here that this is not, when you build these kind of synthetic panels, they build these models. Now currently you're deploying the one for a US consumer, but across kind of different industries. And then was it Ireland, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada. So all the Anglophone countries go get rolled out kind of over the course of this year.
No, in a couple of weeks.
Okay, in a couple of weeks. Technically the same. This year, kind of in this year. Anyway.
Other things coming later.
Yeah, no. So very, very soon. But it's not a one and done thing, because actually and I think we've seen this from other kind of places where some of these big LLMs have started to create their own kind of data, and then actually the models collapse because you end up just emphasizing the kind of the wrong thing and it's not fresh. But actually, it's my understanding that actually these models require maintenance and refreshing, and that's what keeps them kind of vital and relevant because the context window moves, right, as time progresses.
Yeah. So call it hydration. Yeah. So constantly, monthly minimum, right? Hydration of net new batches of aggregated anonymized survey data, and quickly on the horizon, non-survey data. So this requires more science and experimentation. I think it's what we've built is phenomenal. It's great. It meets our immediate need. Clients who come to us with survey question and want quant answer, right? Yep. If we start to introduce behavioral data, transaction data, news, trend, headlines, what might that additional context do to representing and reflecting the human behavior?
So the just to be clear that it's more on the panel's more operating on a quantitative basis rather than a qualitative kind of basis. But is there plans to try and build because that's where it gets super interesting.
It does, and hard to validate.
Yeah.
Right? So this surveys have open ends and verbatims, right? So that's the extent of the qual that we have.
That's the sort of the overlap, I guess.
That's exactly right. There are models, research teams out there that have exclusively trained their models to qual data. So we're talking like 4-hour-long interview transcripts, which is interesting, but I'd imagine impossible to hydrate. And expensive, right? So there's a blend here where I'm not sure if you've seen in the XM Park, we are, and within Brad's org, some of the product folks are down there demoing synthetic personas. Okay. So this is now, we've proven this model. This model meets my accuracy and validity expectations for question and answer in quant fashion. Now that it's done that, I can trust qual output from it, right? Within the same use cases, within the same audiences. We're not asking about dinner last night, all of that still holds. And so that's what we're kind of demoing downstairs, really to get an understanding of what are these kind of next batch of questions and curiosities from clients. What are they going to use this for? What type of, is it marketing? Is it product? Is it, what are we advancing? And validation is going to be hard because it's by design, generative AI can answer just about anything, right? And so there's a lot to learn on that front, but qual is very much here. And I think I'll take the opportunity to build one other kind of extension of this model that we'll call walled garden. And so what'll happen now is, whether driven by Qualtrics or partnership with our clients, we'll start to specialize. It is general and it is wide and it is random, but wouldn't it be better to know how consumers interact or transact with automotive industry versus healthcare versus consumer packaged goods? That's one potential angle. The other is clients want to make it smarter to them and their business.
Well, I was going to say that feels like a natural extension. You take a generalized kind of model and then you go, can we not tailor it to us?
Exactly it. And so we'll build an adapter on top of the model that ingests client data. We'll start with client research data, right? What has Ford researched recently that could be really interesting to feed the model, their target population, how they think about, their products and services. And now the model becomes something that I trust even more in both qual and quant fashion. And I'm willing to democratize it within my organization to have all of my stakeholders, access this.
Awesome.
And so that's walled garden. That's kind of, how we're thinking about advancing this incredible, robust repository, this thing that we've started. How do we now extend it even further?
Awesome. And I know you've always got like a set of early adopters. That's my final question. A set of early adopters. What are you seeing clients getting the most, dialing in on quickly? So what are they doing? Kind of how they kind of, where are they starting with this?
Yeah, I'll give you kind of two examples. My favorite is, even when I meet the haters and the resistors, right? Please consider it for just this, pre-testing a design before you go and invest in time, and budget with humans. Run it through synthetic. See what distributions fall out, what surprises you, what might be missing, what might we change to this design. So that's one. That's my plea to everyone. Just try it for this. the experiments so far and the clients who are decrementing credits, transacting it today, tend to be more of what we talked about earlier, the future-focused concept tests, right?
Yeah.
I got this new thing. Do they like it? Would they pay for it? That and idea screenings. There's a session this week with Allstate. It was phenomenal. It's, I loved it. It was his idea and one that I've been preaching about for a year, where they had 25 different, let's just say, offers or, messages that they wanted to test. You can't do that with humans. 25 is absurd, right? You'd end up breaking it down into 5 different cells. And so you can run 25 through synthetic. It doesn't get tired, and reduce it down to here are the top 10 that we should then fill in the blank, take back to the team and call it good, or, advance to different types of research. And so those generally, we call it more like idea innovation, right?
Yeah.
Research innovation.
Perfect. Well, thanks very much.
Of course.
That was, it's really fascinating. Because I must admit, and I've heard about some of I read about some of the synthetic data sort of talk and read some of the hyperbole kind of like that circulates some of that sort of stuff. I had my concerns. If it's like kind of models creating literally synthetic data, you're like going, yeah, that's not going to be right. But if it's actually based on actual human insights that's being gathered, and then it becomes you can gather that and use it as a predictive foundation to test kind of like scenarios and make that kind of easier, then that just feels like a really valuable thing.
That's exactly right. And it's, that's why the name is not appropriately, but it's just not, because it's real data. It is real predictive intelligence. Yeah. And I think simulation kind of describes it best, where, we've studied and learned from humans, their behaviors, interests, attitudes, and beliefs. And we're simulating that, right? For the purposes of market research and intelligence. So, yeah, I love it. Little by little, we'll get them.
Thank you so much.
Of course, my pleasure.
Well, I feel like I possibly am going to be in danger of repeating myself. I mean, it was another great conversation. I love the insight that Ali gave into synthetic panels and how they work and their potential applications in customer insight and decision making. And overall, I do really hope that you enjoyed the series of conversations that I've had with Qualtrics execs here at their X4 event. See you next time, and do tune in again. Thanks very much.
Wow, what a great interview. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. Find out more about me and the work that I do at adrianswinscoe.com. Do leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. And if you have any comments, feedback, or questions about the podcast, then feel free to send me a message to podcast@adrianswinscoe.com. And do tune in again. Thanks very much.